There's something undeniably comforting about having a space all your own, a sanctuary where every tool, every project, every quiet moment is completely yours. For Jack Monroe, that cherished refuge was his garage. It wasn't merely a place to park his car, it was his personal haven, where he stored his prized tools, tinkered on small projects, and found solace away from the chaos of the world. For over 15 years, Jack had maintained his property with care and pride, ensuring that every inch of his yard and every item in his garage was in perfect order. In a neighborhood known for its manicured lawns and pristine white picket fences, his home was a symbol of independence and self-reliance. But one ordinary afternoon, everything changed. Jack had just finished a busy day at work, and as he pulled into his driveway, he was greeted by an unexpected sight that made his heart sink. Under his windshield wiper, glinting in the afternoon sun, was a bright green sheet of paper. At first, Jack assumed it was nothing more than a stray takeout menu tossed aside. However, as he stooped to pick it up, his pulse quickened when he read the words, HOA violation notice. $79, fine for improper lawn maintenance. For years, Jack's lawn had been a picture of health and order. The grass was consistently green, neatly mowed, and looked exactly as it had for over 15 years. It wasn't a perfect golf course, but it was a testament to his commitment to his home. The notice, however, was not only absurd, it was a challenge. Someone, or something, had decided that Jack's property was not exempt from their petty rules. Almost immediately after discovering the notice, the familiar sound of high heels clicking on the sidewalk reached Jack's ears. He looked up to see Karen Mitchell approaching. Karen, who had recently become the self-appointed enforcer of neighborhood rules and the president of the local HOA board, was known throughout the community for her relentless inspections and her strict adherence to the guidelines, no matter how trivial. With her perfectly styled blonde hair, designer handbag swinging at her side, and a tablet clutched tightly in her hand, Karen exuded an air of authority that left little room for debate. "Good afternoon, Mr. Monroe," Karen said in a tone that was deceptively sweet yet laced with an edge of entitlement. "I see you've received your violation notice. According to Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the HOA Guidelines, your lawn exceeds the maximum allowed height by half an inch. You owe a fine of $79. Jack regarded her calmly. "My lawn has been maintained exactly the same way for the past 15 years, he replied, evenly. "It's healthy and neat, just the way I like it." Karen barely glanced up from her tablet. "Rules are rules," she replied, curtly. "If the fine isn't paid within 72 hours, it doubles. And while you're at it, those garden gnomes aren't on the approved decoration list." The garden gnomes, prized keepsakes collected over many years in honor of his late wife, had graced his yard without complaint until now. Karen's dismissive tone and unwavering determination stung, but Jack remained composed. "New board, new rules," she said, waving her tablet as she strode away, convinced she was ushering the neighborhood into a modern era of strict compliance. Over the following days, a pattern emerged. It wasn't just Jack who was being harassed by Karen's petty fines. Several neighbors found themselves on the receiving end of her enforcement. Sarah Thompson, an ER nurse from 3 houses down, was repeatedly hassled about her garbage bins, while Mark, a local firefighter, received fines for a children's basketball hoop that had hung undisturbed for years. Even an elderly couple was cited for having rose bushes that grew naturally. In his 25 years of service, Jack had learned to spot the signs of abuse and harassment. When he began scrolling through the neighborhood Facebook group that morning, he found complaint after complaint detailing Karen's overzealous inspections and fines. Each story was a small injustice that, when combined, painted a disturbing picture of a system designed to bully those who could least afford to be bullied. Karen wasn't simply enforcing rules, she was targeting specific residents, especially those who worked long, irregular hours, such as first responders and essential workers. 2 days after that lime green notice, after a particularly grueling double shift handling a bank robbery downtown, Jack returned home to an even more shocking sight. Two black SUVs, emblazoned with HOA security in bold letters, were parked in front of his driveway, completely blocking access. Through his windshield, he watched as Karen Mitchell, dressed in her designer suit and wielding her tablet like a scepter, confidently strutted across his front lawn, snapping pictures of every detail: the garden hose, the welcome mat, even the smallest imperfection. Each flash of her camera made his blood boil, yet he maintained his cool. 20 years on the force had taught him that temper never solved anything. "Excuse me," he called out as he stepped from his car. "You're blocking my driveway. I need to get to my garage." Karen spun around, her perfectly styled blonde hair swishing as if on cue. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Monroe, our neighborhood's most persistent rule breaker," she retorted with a dismissive smirk, tapping her tablet with long, perfectly painted red nails. "Let's see: unpaid fine for lawn height violations, unapproved garden gnome placement, and now non-regulation mailbox color." Jack couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity. Non-regulation mailbox color. "My mailbox has been white for 15 years, he explained. "According to the new guidelines, all mailboxes must be painted pristine pearl white from the Anderson Paint Company collection. Mine is classic white, a completely different shade." For a split second, Karen's confident smile faltered. Sensing an opportunity, Jack pulled out his phone and began recording. "I understand you're new to the neighborhood, but these security vehicles are parked illegally. They're blocking access to my property, a clear violation of City Ordinance 2345. Her smile flickered briefly before she regained her composure. "I have full authority as an HOA board member to enforce our community standards," she declared, gesturing to two men in ill-fitting uniforms, leaning against their SUVs. Yet, even as she spoke, Jack noticed something odd about their badges. They resembled police badges, but didn't quite match the standards he expected. In his extensive experience, he knew every licensed security company in the area, and Mitchell Security Solutions wasn't one of them. Taking a deep breath, Jack tried reasoning once more. "Look, I understand that you're trying to maintain property values, but blocking someone's driveway over a $79 fine isn't just unreasonable, it's illegal. I'd hate to have to escalate this further." Karen's face flushed as red as her manicured nails. "Is that a threat, Mr. Monroe? Because I have photos documenting every violation on your property, and the HOA board will be very interested in your aggressive attitude," she snapped. She then turned to the security guards. "Make a note of his threatening behavior," she ordered, as they fumbled with their notepads. Jack noticed their shoulder patches were peeling off, evidence that their uniforms were far from professional. Something was off, and his instincts told him that there was more to this than mere petty fines. Quickly, Jack pulled up the city's business license database on his phone. Within minutes, his suspicions were confirmed. No licensed security company was registered under Karen's name or her brother's, whom he'd seen at the last HOA meeting in similar attire. Just then, Mrs. Garcia from next door burst out in her nurse's scrubs. "Chief Monroe, I'm so glad you're here. They've been blocking my driveway too, and I'm late for my hospital shift," she exclaimed. Karen's expression shifted the moment she heard Chief. Instead of backing down, she lifted her chin higher. "Your title doesn't matter here, Chief Monroe. HOA rules apply to everyone equally," she declared. "I'm sorry," Jack replied coolly, "but I need to document a few more violations before processing the additional fines for your uncooperative behavior." With her clipboard clutched tightly, Karen marched away, leaving Jack to piece together a growing pattern of abuse. Over the next several days, evidence of Karen's systematic harassment emerged. It wasn't merely that she was issuing fines for minor infractions, she was targeting the homes of our community's essential workers. Sarah Thompson, the dedicated ER nurse, wasn't alone. Mark, the local firefighter, had been fined repeatedly for his child's basketball hoop, even though it had hung undisturbed for 5 years. An elderly couple was slapped with citations for naturally grown rose bushes, and even a local teacher was penalized for parking his car in his own driveway, because it was deemed unsightly. Late one afternoon, a text from Tom, Jack's trusted deputy, confirmed his worst fears. "Chief, remember the flooding issue last spring? Karen's brother's company just won the contract for drainage repair at 3 times the cost of the other bids. Jack leaned back in his chair, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Karen's so-called rules weren't about preserving property values, they were a power trip, a calculated harassment of those who truly serve the community. Determined to expose the corruption, Jack headed to the county clerk's office. With the assistance of Mrs. Rodriguez, a friendly clerk, he pulled HOA registration documents from the past 6 months. As he flipped through the pages, one glaring omission jumped out. Karen had never disclosed her family connection to the security company during the bidding process. A clear conflict of interest. Then came an even bigger revelation. Karen's home business registration revealed that she had been running a daycare center out of her garage, caring for up to 6 children at a time, an activity strictly prohibited by HOA rules. Yet she used the same rules to fine neighbors for having home offices. Worse still, she lacked the proper state licensing for childcare. As if that weren't enough, Mark the firefighter sent photos showing Karen's security company vehicles parked in fire lanes around the neighborhood. Such actions not only violated city ordinances, but also endangered lives by blocking emergency access. Jack spent the afternoon compiling evidence. Property maps showed that Karen had extended her back fence 2 feet beyond her property line, and security camera footage from his cruiser documented multiple instances where her company had blocked emergency vehicle access. The HOA's financial records revealed that she had been pushing the board to increase fines while funneling all security contracts to her brother's unlicensed company. Every piece of evidence painted a damning picture of systematic abuse of power. Jack meticulously copied every document, storing them in both digital and hard copy formats. Years of police work had taught him the importance of thorough documentation. At this point, if you're enjoying the story, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life justice tales. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to light. Just as Jack was finalizing his case, Officer Rodriguez rushed into his office with urgent news. "Chief, you won't believe this. Karen's security company just tried to boot Dr. Thompson's car from the emergency room entrance. He was rushing in for critical surgery." Though anger surged within him, Jack maintained his cool. This was the final piece of evidence he needed. That evening, his phone lit up with a message. Karen had submitted a proposal for expanded security measures, and an emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for the next night. A smile crept onto Jack's face. This was the perfect moment. Sometimes, the best investigations are those where you let your target walk right into the trap they've set for others. At the emergency meeting, the room was packed with frustrated residents and anxious neighbors. In the cramped, stuffy conference room of the community center, Karen stood at the front in a designer suit, wielding her tablet like a scepter. She launched into a rehearsed speech about her new community safety program, discussing the need for additional security guards and the installation of cameras on every street, all in the name of protecting property values. Beneath her polished tone, however, the room simmered with resentment. After she finished her speech, Jack rose slowly. With the familiar weight of his badge in his pocket, he walked to the front of the room. "Before we vote on these new security measures, there's something everyone needs to know," he announced in a steady, measured tone. "I'm Chief Anderson, and I've been investigating some very concerning issues in our community." Karen's eyes narrowed as she recognized him in uniform. Jack then presented his wall of evidence, photographs of an unlicensed daycare operation running out of her house, copies of business registration documents revealing that her brother owned a security company operating without proper permits, and detailed property maps documenting her illegal fence extension. The projector displayed every piece of evidence in stark detail. The room erupted in murmurs. "That's against both HOA rules and state regulations," Jack stated firmly. "While you fine Sarah Thompson for minor infractions, you're systematically targeting our first responders, our nurses and our firefighters. Those who work long, hard hours and deserve our respect." One by one, residents began to share their own stories. An elderly couple recounted how they'd been fined for their naturally grown rose bushes. A local teacher described how his citation for an unsightly car had disrupted his daily life. The collective anger reached a fever pitch, and Mr. Jenkins, a longtime resident and senior board member, called for an emergency vote. Hands shot up as homeowners, united by their shared grievances, voted unanimously. Karen Mitchell was removed from the board and banned from ever serving again. As Karen stormed out, her designer handbag swinging wildly, she turned back with tears of rage streaming down her face and shouted, "This isn't over." But the community's united front left no doubt that her reign of tyranny was finished. The ultimate twist, just when it seemed that justice had been fully served, Jack revealed one final, unforgettable twist, a statement that would be talked about for years. While most neighborhoods rely on guard dogs for protection, Jack had a secret that few in Willow Creek knew about. Deep in a secluded section of his property, hidden behind a reinforced fence and mature trees, lay a secure pond that housed two massive crocodiles, affectionately named Goliath and Viper. These crocodiles were not typical pets. They were impressive, fully legal exotic animals that had been meticulously maintained in a controlled habitat. Normally Goliath and Viper were confined to their pond, kept far from prying eyes. But on this day, with the corrupt HOA exposed and Karen's authority crumbling, Jack decided to deliver a final, resounding message. At a community event celebrating the restoration of fairness in the neighborhood, as residents mingled and shared their relief, Karen, desperate to cling to her lost power, returned, determined to continue issuing baseless fines. As she approached the area near Jack's property with her tablet, Jack calmly walked to the hidden switch and activated it. The heavy metal gate swung open, and out glided Goliath and Viper. Their massive forms, scales glistening in the afternoon light, and eyes fixed with cold determination sent shockwaves through the crowd. Goliath, the larger of the two, moved deliberately to block Karen's exit, while Viper flanked her from behind. The sight was surreal. The same Karen who had prided herself on enforcing rules now found herself face to face with wild, majestic crocodiles. A living testament that when you try to claim what isn't yours, nature itself can deliver justice. "Get back," Jack's voice rang out, steady and authoritative. "This is my property, and if you ever try to encroach on it again, you'll face the consequences." For several long heart-stopping moments, the only sound was the slow, deliberate movement of the crocodiles, and the collective gasp of the assembled neighbors. Karen's previously unshakable demeanor crumbled as she backed away, her face a mix of terror and disbelief. "Please, get me out of here," she cried, her voice trembling. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated poetic justice. Aftermath and lasting change. News of Karen's dramatic downfall spread like wildfire through Willow Creek and beyond. Neighbors recounted the tale with a mix of awe and satisfaction, a modern fable of entitlement meeting its match. Headlines in local newspapers and viral social media posts captured every detail, from the petty HOA fines and the systematic harassment, to the unforgettable appearance of Goliath and Viper as living enforcers of personal space. In the weeks and months that followed, the community underwent a remarkable transformation. The corrupt practices of the old HOA were exposed in full, forcing the board to re-examine and ultimately reform its policies. New oversight committees were established, fines were reduced to fair levels, and rules were enforced transparently and equitably. Homeowners, especially first responders, nurses, firefighters, and other essential workers, finally felt respected and supported. At neighborhood gatherings, residents celebrated their reclaimed rights. Children played freely in yards that were no longer battlegrounds of petty fines. In one particularly memorable event, during a community barbecue organized by longtime resident Mrs. Thompson, neighbors gathered to share stories, laughter, and the relief of knowing that the power had shifted back to the people. Amid the festivities, a young neighbor handed Jack a handmade card. The crayon drawing depicted him in his police uniform, standing proudly in front of a vibrant rainbow-colored house. The simple message read, "Thank you for making our neighborhood happy again." That card now hangs on his desk at the station, a daily reminder that sometimes, the smallest victories can spark monumental change. For Karen, the consequences were severe and far-reaching. Her reputation was ruined, her tenure on the HOA board ended in disgrace, and her personal life spiraled downward as her husband filed for divorce. Attempts to join another HOA board in a neighboring town were met with swift rejection. Her actions, once masked by arrogant confidence, were now the subject of cautionary tales told throughout the community. Throughout all of this, Chief Anderson, Brock Monroe, continued his work with quiet dignity, ever vigilant in protecting his property and upholding the values of fairness and respect. His garage, his lawn, and every inch of his domain remained his, a sanctuary that no one could infringe upon without facing the consequences. Every time he pulled into his driveway, he double-checked the locks, secure in the knowledge that his personal space was inviolable. A final reflection, as twilight fell over Willow Creek, Brock stood on his porch, gazing out over his property. The cool evening air, and the soft rustle of the wind through the trees, offered a moment of peace after months of turmoil. He reflected on the day it all began, a day that started with a petty violation notice, and culminated in a dramatic confrontation that reshaped an entire community. He remembered every moment, the absurdity of the fine, the defiant glances exchanged with Karen, the mounting evidence of corruption, and ultimately, the surreal sight of crocodiles emerging as nature's enforcers. In that moment of quiet reflection, Brock understood a fundamental truth. True power is not measured by the ability to enforce arbitrary rules, but by the courage to stand up for what is right. His sanctuary was more than just a place to work or store his belongings. It was a symbol of independence, a legacy of hard work, and a testament to the unyielding spirit of a community that refused to be bullied. And while Karen's downfall served as a harsh lesson in humility, it also sparked a transformation, a movement towards transparency, fairness, and mutual respect. The neighborhood, once divided by fear and petty rules, now stood united in the belief that every individual's space was sacred, and that no one was above the law. If you've enjoyed this story, please like, share and subscribe for more real-life lessons on standing up for what's yours. Comment below with where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to light. Every time Brock walked past his garage, he was reminded that true peace comes from defending your own space and upholding your rights. In a world where entitlement often runs rampant, his victory was a beacon of hope, a reminder that sometimes, when the hunter becomes the hunted, justice prevails. And so, as the last rays of sunlight disappeared over the horizon, the residents of Willow Creek settled into a new normal. The legacy of that unforgettable confrontation became part of the community's lore, a story passed down through generations, inspiring future acts of courage, and reminding everyone that when you try to take what isn't yours, the consequences are inevitable. The story of Karen's downfall, of crocodiles emerging to protect a man's sanctuary, is now a modern fable, a testament to the power of standing up for your rights, and the strength of a united community. It's a story that will be told for years to come, a reminder that true authority is earned through respect, not intimidation. If you believe in defending your space and fighting against injustice, then remember this story every time you face adversity. And as always, stay vigilant, stand strong, and never let anyone trample on what's rightfully yours. Please like, share and subscribe for more stories of real-life justice and resilience. Comment below with your thoughts and where you're watching from. Remember, when you try to take what isn't yours, sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted.